always works.
Okay, we are live. And we are
We're
late.
live? Oh
Yeah, live
no,
and
we're
late.
late.
Yes, I think we wanted to start early today, and we are still early, but later than normally. But it's okay. We have the goose with us today, and we
Nice.
again have Laurynas. Hi.
Hi. We're actually like a meter from each other, but we still decided to do it on different computers. Because as we were wiring things up, it was like, oh, this is a little too complicated to figure out on one laptop.
Yes, and also I think it's nicer for each of us is having our own camera and whatever. Sometimes it's getting, then we look at each other and not at the people. So yeah, I think it's good to be on different computers.
Yeah,
How's your week so far?
it's good. It's very busy. Whole team is here, so a lot of moving things, a lot of stuff to figure out. But always fun to be back.
Yes, same feeling. I also feel like we we just briefly said it. What do we want to talk about today? So we just figured out we left last week with tools basically, right? So we gave
Yeah,
our MCP server tool, and correct me if that's wrong. I feel that's also like if we talk about MCP servers, everyone is talking about how to build those tools and give MCP servers those tools, but there is more that you can put into an MCP server or that an MCP server should cover, right? And I think we want to look into those parts today a little bit more. So those maybe that are not talked so much about, but that might be quite useful in an MCP server.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a few things we can cover. I like to think of MCP servers as like websites, but they're for agents. Um, in the same way, when you load a website, you see, initially as of early 90s or whenever the web spec was settled, we had the document, like literally an HTML document. And then we're like, actually, we want to push some buttons on that document. So therefore we have buttons that are kind of like tools. And so the whole thing evolved. Similarly, MCP server, when an agent or LLM connects to it, you sort of like tools is the buttons and surely the main and the most exciting thing, as it's you sort of write it once and then any kind of an agent can connect to it. But you need to explain how to use those tools on what are the best practices. And so there's other facets to the model context protocol that are worth covering that sort of cover that part especially.
Nice. Should we see if we can add it to the ones that we have? If you
Yes.
mind pulling up the code
Let's.
project, if we still have it somewhere, or if you still have it somewhere.
I still have it. Let's pull it up over here. So where we ended last week was we've established an MCP server that I have running. So I have it running here as well. And we've added a tool for searching posts. That's always a one that I like to like. Search is always a nice thing to add as you're sort of building these out as like the first one, because there's like a dynamic input, the query, that if you think about it, like that's kind of hard to figure out. It's like what am I searching for? And I think actually maybe a good place to start is last time, like so far as we've been testing the MCP servers, we've been using the MCP inspector, the little client utility that I had running, which is kind of not that exciting in the sense that like you see it technically working, but you don't see it working how it actually would.
Like from the agent, you mean, right? So you don't see
Yeah,
the agent using the tool, yeah?
yeah. And so I was thinking of like how to show the thing actually working, and then I realized so I'm running this in Cursor, and Cursor has MCP support.
Ooh, nice.
And so I've added the BlueSky context server using so they don't support the URLs directly, I don't think, but if you use the MCP remote, which is like a little proxy utility, if you sort of use that and then use the URL for it, you can connect to remote MCP servers in it. So now I've connected to that MCP server, and so like if I ask it to search for cursor related posts on BlueSky. Please make them safe for work. We're live on stream. I don't want to pull up anything that maybe shouldn't. And you see it call the MCP tool. Well, that's hilarious. I related a cursor or search that are safe for work, but there were no relevant posts found at the time. Okay. Let's see.
Can you look for Honc? Do we have Honc?
Are there any Honc or Hono related posts on BlueSky? Let's see if it finds that. Huh.
Oh.
Is it? I wonder, is this an issue of... No, our thing is receiving everything correctly.
Maybe it's looking for... Maybe it's looking exactly for the thing, so it has to contain Honc or Hono instead of only one of those. So maybe if you just do Hono.
Yeah, try a few queries. Don't just post Honc or Hono. This is actually a really good segue. You see what's happening is like there's a tool, and it's very just like kind of stupidly just like, okay, you asked me to search for Honc or Hono, therefore that's the query that I'm going to run. But what we actually want is to achieve the results, which is to find those posts. Nice, thank you, thanks for keeping it safe for work. And this is something that you can. So there's one way to do it, which is probably what we should have done in the tool. You often can add description. So when the tool is registered for the MCP server, it knows how to best make use of it. But in this case, for example, okay, look at that. We have a colleague mention on from Oscar. Shout out Oscar. We do have a few posts going on. Some build with Honc, so we see it working. This phrase that I asked, try a few queries, don't just post Honc or Hono, that's the stuff that you would add into either prompts or resources.
That's it. Maybe we can we try it and then we try again exactly to look for that, or tell our agent and see if it picks up our resource or our prompt?
Yeah, I think what we could try doing is adding a resource. I don't know if BlueSky has, and I'll need to change sharing window so I can pull up the BlueSky docs, but if there are any, I know they've been asking devs to use search for search intended purposes, not just for like gathering all of the posts, and they have some best practices around that. So that's something that we can encode into a resource or into an example prompt.
So basically, under resources, I would give more information on how to use the tools, right? And that could, in our case, be the documentation of the BlueSky API, because basically that's what we put into our tools.
Yeah, exactly that. I think, resources would be an example how to use any sort of context you would add around, the BlueSky API, the BlueSky protocol, how to post locate, sort of anything that is relevant to not just, specifically to the tool use, that's like a good place to start, but also just in general about the context of what is this data set or this object that this MCP server is attached to and that is giving you access. And that's sort of the stuff that you would want to add into resources. And prompts would be some like sample best practices that you would want to slot in to make sure that whoever's using it make the most of that MCP server.
Cool.
Great. So maybe I'm actually not sure if our client is going to be able to support that, but let's close that. And maybe a good place to start would be an example prompt. And if we pull up, let's see, if we pull up the documentation, I now realize I need to do a better thing with sharing my screen. share screen prompts. Prompts in MCP are predefined templates that can accept dynamic arguments, include context from resources, chain multiple interactions, guide specific workflows. That's sort of the stuff, like the thing that I just did, which is like, hey, search for this or that. You'd sort of want to maybe encode as like try a few different things. They're designed to be user controlled, meaning they're exposed from servers to clients with the intention of the user being able to explicitly select them for use. Let's try adding one and then see if we can register that from the cursor as an MCP client, if it's able to see those. I hope it should be. I've never actually properly tried prompts.
Quick question, because we used the inspector before. Would we only see tools in the inspector, or would we also see prompts and resources?
We'll see prompts.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so that our fallback is we can also, obviously it's more exciting to see it working live.
For sure, yeah. But I was just wondering, I didn't know what the inspector covers and what not, but yeah, it feels like it should.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Stop sharing. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of. I'm working with one screen today, so I'm sort of sharing and resharing the screen again and again.
That's okay.
So adding a prompt, we can do. Let's add it. So we had our tool here. And then let's add this server prompt. Let's call this advanced search. Not that it's particularly advanced, but we can say, let's see, what's the signature for this? We need a name and then a callback for the prompt. I think there's a few different variations of this, because there's also one where you can pass in arguments. So prompts can accept certain dynamic arguments that you can sort of slot in that go along with the full thing. Let's see, how would we break this down? So let's say this is our query, which is what we started with in the original tool call. And then, yeah, let's do just a quick check, as always, that the agent is initialized and that we can use it. And then we can write our prompt. Template prompt. And so this is where we can say, given a search query that is expressed in natural language as a sentence, extract the main. So what we want is, like, in that example at the start, I asked it to search for Honc or Hono, and it just like took that and threw that in the BlueSky search API. And of course, unless somebody explicitly mentioned Honc or Hono, like nothing showed up. So what we want is to take something that is maybe expressed as a little bit of a complex sentence and break it down on, like, what keywords do I need to search to satisfy this query.
So basically what your cursor is suggesting now, extract the main topic, but it could be also separate into two topics if there's an OR logic. So would we also put that in the prompt, or would we say, yeah, I mean the main topic, but then also if there is an OR logic, maybe do to search or something like that?
Yeah, I think what we want is, this, like, we can phrase it as extract the keywords that we would need to search for to satisfy. Let me just make sure that the wrapping is into to satisfy the query. Now, the best case would be to give an example. I'm kind of struggling to come up with it on the spot, but I will trust the LLM enough to. I feel like it should be able to. Language models are pretty good at sort of breaking down and summarizing and doing things like that. So if we do, actually, we could probably turn this into a function that accepts our original query so that we can slot in and create this templated prompt.
Would you also say then, would you also give the prompts, so to say, like now you say extract the keywords, but would you also say search for each of the keywords? Or or would you just think that the LLM just picks that up also automatically?
That's a good question. My sense is, as we send this full query, it should be able to use the tools to call that.
Okay.
But I am not certain.
I think in the beginning we put it, right? So you said, oh, please, like, do search. Well, I mean, we can try it out. We see what it will do.
Yeah. I think it should. Hold on. Let me just. I actually realize I need to pull up the documentation for using TypeScript SDK model context protocol. I realize I'm doing that in the background, so I'll just make sure that that link is also up. This is for the repo. And then let me find prompts that shows me an example on how to use it. So this, let me just copy that over. So this is pulled from the documentation example where they show how to use prompts. So this is a review code, and then it returns. It sort of slots in this message, which is role user. Please review this code. This is the content that gets submitted to the agent. Actually, we don't even need necessarily this check, but what we should do is now that we have a little function that constructs our prompt, and then what we need to do is return, and let's see. It's not an array. Should be just an object. Yes, this is where TypeScript is extremely helpful. There we go. So this is our prompt. We have a prompt called advanced search that accepts a query, adds a little bit of sort of boilerplate what to do with this query. I've heard it's a best practice in LLMs to do this, to use XML tags for that. So let's use those. So we have a little bit of like system-like prompt, and then we have a query that actually is the user inserted query. And then we return that, which means that now the server sort of tells the client, submit this to the language model, and then hopefully the language model should be able to sort of break down this query. And as in our example, where once we've told it to try different, try a few queries, don't just post Honc or Ono, like you see it call the tool a few times in a row.
Nice. I mean, let's see if it picks it up.
Yes. So now our thing is still running. We should see the connection. Let's see if we reload it. I don't see it show up in prompts. But yeah, I'm not sure if Cursor's MCP supports prompts actually. Restart it. Do you have in BlueSky context server. If it does not, oh no, I don't want it to analyze code.
It has advanced search, right? So
no, but this is it reads it from the source code.
Oh,
Use the MCP server. I don't know if this would. No, it still resorts to yeah. Okay, well then there's the boring path, which is we spin up our inspector as we did last time.
And we can look from the inspector at least, yeah.
Yeah, and then if I open it up.
It's also not something, if you restart it, magically it would appear. Well, I mean, should not be the case, but you never know.
Yeah. Let's see, now I need to share stop that screen, share MCP inspector. We've connected that, and we see our prompt here. So then if we run this, we'd sort of, we get the thing correctly. Okay, that's disappointing. I thought that MCP servers were supported by Cursor. Let me just double check that. But it might be not necessarily a Cursor issue, but the fact that we're using the proxy. Yeah, that probably is part of the reason, although I'm not sure. Tool use is such a dominant use case that sort of all MCP servers and especially MCP clients standardize on that. Like, yeah, they often forget that there's other things as well, like resources, sampling, and things like that.
Meaning if you only have tools, you would need to draft and do your tools in such a good way that it would be picked up by the tool, like separating, for example, words as well, right? So
yeah, this is actually, I mean, we could probably do that. Well, no, actually, I don't know if you'd be able to use a tool call, because you'd need then the MCP server to be able to access an LLM. That's when you get to like, okay, now this MCP server needs to have some kind of an API key, which is part of the whole thing, is that this ends up being this like web of things where like your MCP client is also an MCP server that can get accessed by other MCP clients. But prompts is very sort of a user-facing thing where it's like, that's just, if you think of it as like a template, a template that you can almost like /command insert, or like one of those tools that are like quickly expands like a tiny snippet of text that you type into a paragraph. That's sort of I guess the use case that you can drive. And shame I can't illustrate it in action as that, but we verified at least that it works as a in the MCP server.
It shows up, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the next part would be then to look into resources as well, right? So this is also, did you know if that is supported by Cursor or?
I don't think so. I'm looking at, there's a lot. So I'm sort of, if I open up let me just share this tab. Most of the stuff that it references in here is tools. And that's what it most seems like it. That's the main use case that Cursor intends. Yeah. We could, if I don't know if, I'm not sure if Claude will be able to support a local host URL. I don't think so, unless it's exposed. Yeah, that won't work. But either way, how much time do we still have?
I mean, I would say we still have 6 more minutes or 5 more minutes.
let's see if we can, like, we've added a prompt. Let's see if we can add resources. So this just referring to the TypeScript SDK, like this is sort of the, a very simple example for accessing your resource. So it's sort of, you express it as like a, what's it called? A sort of a protocol-like thing, like a config : / and then, maybe the path that you want to do it to. So that can be, that sort of mimics something like a file URL, or it would be an HTTP URL or anything like that. And then you define a callback where you actually sort of retrieve and show that information into the LLM.
Is there something, or have you experienced, depending on the size of the resource, like if you have a very large resource, does it make the whole experience slower because it needs to go through the resource, or is that not?
I guess it's always a game of balance where it might, obviously if you make, you want to load as much information as possible in there, but you want to load just the necessary information. So that's where you'd use something like a dynamic user resource with parameters. So if you have certain documentation, that you only retrieve the parts that are relevant to this. The reason being is, like, one, of course, this MCP server itself slowing down if it needs to do a lot of heavy computation to retrieve the information. More importantly, two, context windows these days are very large, but they're still limited. And there's a question of, like, if you just load everything into the context window of a language model, like how useful the output that you get is going to be. So there's always a bit of a trial and error and finding out what actually is relevant here. And they, the creators of the model context protocol themselves, they, this is not an operation that should perform significant computation or have side effects. That's what tool uses are for. Even though resources are quite close to tools, like in our case, search is in some way a resource retrieval. We're retrieving posts from BlueSky, but we've decided to put that in as a tool, mostly because it's a more heavier maybe interfacing with the BlueSky API. But what we can do, as an example, is we can load the relevant docs section. So if I open up this tab, this is the HTTP reference for search posts that we're using in the tool. An example would be loading this resource, or sort of effectively fetching this documentation page, if provided a certain method. So let's see. If you look at the URL shape of this, it transforms the camel. Is this camel case? I always
that's camel case. I think so, right? So it's like small, big.
So there's like this part that kind of always stays the same, even here if you get feed, but it's the last two words, the verbs, that change. And so now if I switch into here,
so now you can, and you use that camel case last word for the dynamic part, right? So that you say this is like the documentation side, and now look for, I forgot already, like BlueSky search, or what the last words were there in the camel case.
Yeah. So what we can do is basically we can, our tool is quite simple. Just like we've structured it quite simply as just accepting the query, but there's like more stuff that the search posts can use. And so if before we maybe implement that feature in the tool itself, we can implement a resource that tells more context to whoever's using this MCP server about how to make use of the search posts tool effectively. So that's how you can kind of have a 1-to sort of correspondence with the resource and tools. So our resource becomes effectively docs, and then the tool is taking actions on the BlueSky API. Let's see if I need to open up I'll just copy over this example that we saw from the documentation that uses dynamic resource. And then we can use the resource template class to dynamically construct this URL. So our URL that we wanted was docs.bluesky.app. Just sort of paste that in, but actually,
and this last part was a 1.
Yeah, this is the part where we sort of want to kind of construct dynamically. Let's see if we can change this. What we'd want is method. That's a string. Yes. I'm kind of winging it on the fly here, but let's see if I'm not sure if that's sort of the intended use.
Because for the other one it was only the user ID.
Yeah.
For the example one, yeah.
The other one would just take the user ID, and that's the dynamic part that you insert.
Yeah.
In this case, we're sort of inserting the method that we want to look up documentation for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looking at the time, we're basically at 30 minutes.
Yes,
and
we
I know
are
this
over
is like
already.
leaving on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. We can pick it up from there. You have to join again. I'm sorry.
That's fine. We'll figure this out one by one.
And I think there's one part that I'm curious, and I haven't completely understand sampling yet, but that's also part of the MCP server. So I think next time you have to talk with me about sampling as well. And you mentioned already that's harder to implement, so maybe we are not implementing sampling, but I think it's at least good that we give an overview how you would use it and what it does, because I feel then we've covered almost everything that is in an MCP server. And then maybe at one point we come to authentication. Because I think that's still like a cliffhanger for more episodes.
Yeah, that's still calling for more episodes. I think that's fair. I think what we can do is we can finish the resource. I'll do it a little bit off screen, so I'm not reading the docs on the stream, and then we can get into talk a little bit about sampling. Would be very fun if I'll see if I can find any clients that maybe implement it. I think that's a really fun feature of the Model Context Protocol. And then we'll see. We might stay tuned for our authentication episode.
At whenever that happens. But
whenever that happens.
Let's call it a stream, and see you next week.
Thanks for joining. See you next